Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session. Welcome back to the Creative Industries Festival 2021. We're going all the way through May. We've still got 2 weeks worth of events coming up after this one. So please do take a look at the full program, which will be posted in the chat, and sign up for some more sessions. Just before we get going today, a couple of housekeeping notices. The meeting's being recorded. So if you don't want to be on camera, if you don't wish to be part of the recording, which may be made available publicly at a later date, then please do keep your camera off. That's fine. You can communicate with us through the chat. You can put questions and comments, and you can chat to each other in the chat if you so wish. But we also have a Padlet page, which is where you can post a notice about yourself and your contact details if you want to follow up with anyone who's in the session as well. So thanks everyone for coming. Today's session is a chat with Arti Shah, who's here on my right, I guess, or left. I don't know which way your screen is configured. She's on my right. And Arti is in the festival, we've been talking a lot about portfolio careers in the creative industries. We had a session with students the other day where we talked about that as a very probable option for people. And Arti Shah herself has a very broad and intriguing range of job titles, including she's an actor, she's a motion capture performer, she's also a creature artist, a puppeteer, a corporate model, and a motivational speaker, which is quite some list. And we've asked her here today to talk about all of those, if that's what you want to ask her about. But Arti is best known for her contribution to creating fantastical characters in a range of blockbuster films, including Maz Kanata in Star Wars Force Awakens, Rocket Racoon in Guardians of the Galaxy, and Gringots Goblin in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Arti is a self-described small person. She stands 4 feet tall. So she's had to overcome a range of challenges and barriers to get where she is today in the industry. She's also a proud British Asian woman with a young family and a son who I met the other day during our pre-meet chat, and he Zoom bombed and showed me some Lego. He was very shocked. He had an important Lego update, which couldn't wait. Yeah, so today, how it's going to work today is I will chat first to Arti for a little while. We'll see how that goes. And then if you do want to ask some questions, please put them in the chat and we'll put those to Arti directly towards the end of the session. So welcome, Arti. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So my first question is how has things been for you recently? How is lockdown? How is your career? How's your family? How are you?
At the beginning of lockdown, it was very quiet. So the focus was on family, making sure we're all okay. And then things started to get busy. I had a number of motivational talks planned, which all got cancelled because no events were being held. And then I decided, well, I'm going to be proactive and speak to everybody, and let's do it online, as almost everything went online. Education, people were working from home. People who were told your job can't be done from home, can be done from home. And in that sense, things have been quite easy in terms of being able to do a number of talks a day, not having to worry about travel. A number of things that I have been talking to a lot of people about is people who are disabled and struggling to get from A to B with limited mobility, etc. The way things have moved online has been fantastic, and I think even organizations are seeing, well, we want to make our workforce more inclusive, talking about diversity and having people with different abilities. Those that weren't able to commute, who used to struggle, are now actually, okay, well, they can work from home, they can job share. So I think things have improved for the better. Things are so much more accessible for a lot more people as well now. And in terms of the film industry, with huge thanks to Tom Cruise, who obviously working on Mission Impossible 7 and was very strict with COVID, with testing, with speaking to the government before commencing filming. That was the first production to start up during the pandemic. And thanks to him, people in my industry are able to work. So many people had lost their jobs. Mental health has been a big thing, and the entertainment industry, that is close contact, that is, being on location, being on sets. And I think now, constantly having COVID tests, everybody wearing masks, and, just being careful, we are able to keep the industry running.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I'm glad you've still got a lot going on. It sounds fantastic. Actually, I was going to ask you whether the online space is a place where you feel a lot of people like yourself can possibly be more comfortable as compared to the physical space. Are you happy working online? Would you rather be in person, back physically working?
I think for me, because I have a young family as well, a child who's in nursery, and if I were to have one or two talks booked today and traveling, that's a whole day taken up. So it's easier to manage my diary, my day, and I'm finding talking online is actually quite easy to do. And it would actually be interesting to see what it would be like speaking to an audience again, physically, and whether, not that I'm a nervous person or shy, but whether I would come up with stage fright. But I doubt it, because I have been also working in the entertainment industry during the pandemic as well. So I think personally I would be fine, but I think working online has been very beneficial for me, for a lot of people.
Yeah. Actually, I was having this exact same conversation with a colleague, I think he's here today, about the fact we've all become so used to Zoom and being recorded and being on camera that when we have to go back into a lecture theatre, it's going to feel very strange again. Everyone's a little bit anxious about the future, but we still don't know what that's going to look like for education.
Yes. And universities are opening back up again, aren't they, next week?
Yeah, next week is a little bit late for us at Brooks, actually. We've mostly finished teaching, but yeah, the campus is open again. There are students around, so I think hopefully come September, things will be looking a bit more normal again. Great. So let's sort of go back in time a bit and think about the start of your career. Can you tell us a little bit about how you broke into the film and TV industry and how that started and where it came from?
I've probably mentioned this so many times, and with a lot of actors, they train really hard. They study. My route is a bit unconventional. I studied business. In school, I enjoyed drama, and I just decided to pursue the business avenue. However, it wasn't until I graduated when my year tutor said, "Look, Arti, I can really see you working in this industry, but I don't know how he meant me working in this industry. Was it my physicality? Was it my personality? I don't know." And I haven't spoken to him since, and I do need to try and have that conversation with him. So I moved to London. I worked in advertising sales. I worked in recruitment. I used my holidays to build up my CV. I had no acting experience. I did a course in method acting, which I found to be extremely therapeutic, because you were touching on your emotions to bring out a character, to bring out your emotions, to relate to a certain character that you're playing. And I keep physically fit as well. And I think those two went hand in hand. So I'll explain how my career path went, and you'll see, oh yeah, that went hand in hand. And I signed up with a couple of agencies and no experience. And these particular agencies did send me for stereotypical roles, which I have never talked about. Whereas I am dressed up as an elf for a Christmas music countdown show with a couple of celebrities. And back then I thought, okay, well, look, I need the exposure, I need the work, I need to build up my CV. And I did it. I didn't like it. I didn't like being portrayed like that. And that's not why I am in the industry, to be dressed up, to be a gimmick, to be stereotypical. I auditioned for a well-known children's program, Blue Peter. through an agency. And this was around 2005, 2006. And BBC, Blue Peter, back then were looking for so-called disabled people with different abilities to be presenters. And, they had noticed, okay, we need to make our children's programming so much more diverse, because children are so important. What they see on TV becomes the norm in society, doesn't it? If we portray models constantly, no ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, people in short stature, our future generations will constantly think, okay, this is what our society should look like. And well done to BBC. They've got another fantastic children's program called Bigleton, which I've seen with my son. And you see a child in a wheelchair, a child with achondroplasia, a child with a missing limb, different ethnicities, and that's fantastic. So I auditioned for Blue Peter. I didn't get it, but to audition is a big thing. So I did a little bit of TV work, and then I got made redundant from my recruitment job, which was, I guess, a blessing, because I've got to get out there and do something with my life. I need to earn a living. And a client of mine that I used to recruit for also said to me, look, why don't you recruit for me as well? So I used to do that on the side, and well as working, going to auditions, working in the film industry. And Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was my first, break. They were after a number of goblins. So there were a lot of small actors. This was the first time I worked with a number of small actors as well. And, it was an eye-opener to see people, not just small, but, different shapes, sizes, abilities as well. And the film set was fantastic. And the agency had made sure that everybody was able to work. I mean, some people weren't able to walk far. Some people were quite small, where climbing regular steps were difficult. And they had steps made so that they could climb onto seats, they could get onto the trailers, use the toilets. Everything was well thought out. And so much went into it, but it made working accessible for so many people to create films. And this is 2009, 2010. And as James has mentioned, I've worked on a number of big blockbuster films. I also have worked on the Paralympic opening ceremony back in 2012 as a procast aerialist, where I had to learn static trapeze, various things, and overcoming my fear of heights, which I didn't make well known. It was a job and I wanted to do it, but I was secretly scared of being 20 feet up in the air, but I did it. But also then I met a number of people who had disabilities, hard of hearing, partially sighted, missing limbs, but everybody was able to do it, and it was made accessible for them. And it was also an eye-opener for me as well, that, not everybody was just a performer. They had other jobs as well, because you have to make a living, and looking different, work isn't constant, because roles aren't coming your way all the time, primarily because of what we look like. And I'll touch on that a bit later as well. And back in 2012, we were full of so much hope, because the Paralympics were in London, Olympics were in London, Channel 4 were hosting it, and there was so much talk about change happening, making things accessible. Nothing had happened. Absolutely nothing happened. And even, auditions back then, there was nothing new coming my way. There were roles where because I was small, Christmas episode, dressing up as an elf, but it was for a big TV series. But why did it have to be a Christmas episode? Why did I have to dress up as an elf? And I made it known to my particular agent at that time, who then took it to the casting director. And they changed the script a little bit because of what I said. However, it was still a Christmas episode dressing up as an elf. I'd rather be a doctor. Give me auditions like that. So that is what it was like back then.
So that was, I guess, nearly 10 years ago now. So you've been working for 10 years. Do you think things have changed much over that time? And you mentioned what sounds like almost perfect, very reasonable adjustments that Warner Brothers were able to make because of their scale and their resources. They can afford to change sets and make things a lot more accessible. Have those kind of reasonable adjustments fed through into, lower budget productions, TV shows, other kinds of films, advertising?
I think lower budget productions, I'm not sure because I haven't worked on anything as such. I mean, okay, a lower budget would maybe be 8 million compared to Star Wars or Guardians of the Galaxy. I worked on Attack the Block, but that was a physically demanding role. And I don't think it would have been suitable for somebody with a disability or with a different ability. And I guess it's also like if you were applying for a job, you apply for something that you were able to do. And if you are auditioning for a role, it is something that you can do. And if you can act, you can act. But casting directors, roles are written for certain people. So I think perceptions also do need to change a little bit. And in terms of making things accessible, there are productions happening where requirements are for those who are in a wheelchair, again, those with different abilities, maybe short in stature, and accessibility is being made because these particular people are in mind. Parts have been written for these people. And I think in order to have the diversity within the film industry, it needs to continue where they would think about, okay, we need these people to work. We need to make it happen for them. So what can we do? Let's speak to certain people. Let's speak to people who work in these agencies and find out what things are needed. And also, most definitely, since the beginning of lockdown, a lot of auditions, well, every single audition is online now. And personally, I think that is so much easier because you're not stressing about traveling and getting from A to B. I think ever since I've been working in this industry and having to travel into London for an audition, I've always had to ask somebody to press the buzzer for me because I can never reach. And there's multiple stairs, that you're having to climb. I've now found like this gadget which extends and I can, use that to make my life easier. But, if you're in a wheelchair, maybe it is thought out, but, you can't climb the stairs and it's also exhausting. So I think having auditions online makes it so much easier for people with different abilities. And since last lockdown, I am noticing a huge change in the writing out there and the types of roles that are coming up and that I'm auditioning for. We've got huge streaming channels and they're spending so much money on their productions. But for example, Netflix, I think a couple of months ago, there was a huge article where they are spending so much on diversity, not just in terms of having more women, ethnic minorities, but I am also noticing parts that are written for people with different abilities.
That's interesting. Yeah, actually, I was going to touch on that as well. Because obviously there's been a boom in production in the UK, as you said, driven by the streaming giants primarily, along with the kind of inward investment, the Tom Cruise movies and so on. So it's interesting you notice that there are more diverse roles coming out of that. I mean, everyone noticed Bridgerton. There was kind of very deliberate colorblind, not even colorblind casting. They addressed it. They talked about the fact that a lot of the characters were played by black actors. For Bridgerton, which is obviously a very white middle class genre, generally the period roles. So that's interesting. So are you being offered more roles through streaming platforms for those kind of productions?
Yes, I've had a handful of auditions come up for streaming channels. They're definitely thinking about including people like myself or people with different abilities, which is fantastic. It's just a matter of getting the role. So it's constant auditioning to get, my break where you can see my face.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the. I mean, obviously the roles you had were fantastic opportunities in the fantastical realm, but often that means that you are playing, alien creatures or magical creatures, and you don't necessarily get to act with your face. I guess you're acting with your physicality rather than your face. So yeah, I'm sure you're looking forward to getting roles where you will be able to be yourself.
Yeah, yes. And also with both aspects, whether be it my or someone's face or my or someone else's physicality, you are also acting with your emotions, because every character, no matter be it a creature or a human, has a backstory, has a purpose. So you are still touching on your emotions. And for example, Maz Kanata, Lupita Nyong'o was the face and the voice. I was the body. However, they're doing scenes with me as well, and the actors have to react to me. And sometimes I am doing the dialogue, and most of the time I'm not doing the dialogue. I do the dialogue for timing purposes. And when I'm not doing the dialogue, the actors are able to react to me because I understand the character and I'm acting with my eyes as well, which is very, very important.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've all seen the kind of behind the scenes movies of people with green screens and, Andy Serkis becoming Gollum, and everyone's very fascinated, I think, with that process and how it works, because it is so magical, and it is something that was completely new, relatively recently in cinema. So yeah. How did you find being on set? Is it very long-winded process being a character animator? Are you there in the same setup for a long period of time? How does it go?
Yes, so I think for example, wearing a green suit, doing motion capture or prosthetics, um, the setup is very similar. However, with the motion capture, when there's more than one actor doing it, like myself and Lupita Nyong'o, I'm watching off camera, watching exactly what she's doing. For example, handing the lightsaber off when she's saying something in particular. So I have to pay attention. I have to concentrate so much more to make sure that I'm doing exactly the same thing when a certain dialogue or movement is being used. Prosthetics, for example, it's just that one individual who is playing that character. But you're in makeup for maybe 4 hours. So it's a very long day, an early start. And wearing a green suit or blue suit and working with a green screen, most of the time you're using your imagination because there's nothing there, just a screen that you're reacting to. But it's challenging, and it moves you out of your comfort zone. There's also a lot of waiting around sometimes, but that's just the name of the game, I guess.
Yeah, I've spoken to other actors, and particularly people with smaller parts in big films, and it does seem like you have to be very patient, waiting,
Yes,
and you
yes,
get very good at networking in your downtime and chatting to everybody.
yes, yes.
Um, Great. So we've covered a little bit about your background, how you got into the industry. I guess thinking about recent events, there's been a lot of talk in the film industry about diversity, particularly racial diversity in the last year or 2 years. And obviously we've had the big award ceremonies have just come through. The Oscars was widely seen as a sort of success in terms of diversity, with the first non-European woman to win best director and so on. So the Oscars seems to be getting into a good place, whereas the Golden Globes, on the other hand, are in a bit of a crisis. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on the awards system and how all that feeds into the industry, and what they should be doing to change, and if they are going in the right direction. That's a very big question. So
I think big names again. Tom Cruise, for example, yeah, he was just in the news this week, and Scarlett Johansson, because big names are talking about it and they're taking action. They're doing something about it, like Tom Cruise handing back his Golden Globes. Um, People like this will make change happen because they're huge names, reputable, and people will listen to them. Where, I mean, if people were to go out there and protest, actors that aren't very well known, I don't think anything would be done about it. So it's great to have people like this doing something about it. And I think change will happen with the Golden Globes, getting tongue-tied here. And yes, Oscars, I think, are leading the way, but let's see how it goes. I hope it's not a one-off. I hope it's not because there has been talk a lot about diversity, about ethnicity. I hope it's not just because of that they've said, okay, and I hope that change continues to happen. So I think, yes, things will improve for the better. And if big names continue to speak up for people who are not able to use their voices, then we will definitely see things moving for the better. And also material is changing. I think people are being given a chance as well. And I think audiences are more interested in watching different types of films as well. And I think it goes hand in hand quite well. That's my take.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's not coincidental that all this change is happening during the pandemic. I mean, the film industry is kind of in a bit of a crisis anyway, in terms of big blockbuster productions, and everyone's concerned about whether theatres are going to come back online, or not online, that's a poor choice of word, whether theatres are going to come back to life. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on cinemas. Do you think people will be willing to get back into cinemas? Are big blockbusters going to be the same as they were pre-pandemic moving forwards?
I think certain films that are coming out, which are only cinema release, I think that will be a good indicator as to whether people are actually ready to go back into the cinema. Myself being a huge cinema fan and obviously supporting it, because without cinema, without obviously streaming nowadays, productions wouldn't be possible anymore. But I personally would wait for things to be shown at home, maybe for another year or so, because my personal feeling is that, numbers are still high, but people would be careful, people would get tested, people would do things. But I think it's going to be a huge test to the cinema industry as to, whether people will actually go, and also the price of tickets as well, but a certain streaming channel, for example, to watch something on their channel, you do have to pay the same as a cinema ticket, which people have been doing. But I think there are huge films such as Bond. There's another release, Venom, a Marvel release, DC, oh God, I should know my difference. Oh my goodness, I do apologize. Somebody can correct me. That is just cinema release as well. So I think that would be a good test for future cinema releases to see what it's going to be like.
Yeah, I mean, we're all very hopeful here in the film studies department that cinemas will bounce back, and we have, we have various multiplexes in Oxford. We also have small independent cinemas. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things that happened during the on-off lockdowns in the last few years is that, in the last year, feels like longer, is that the small independent cinemas seem to actually do quite well out of it. There was a lot more space for smaller films to be released, and there was more of those kind of films available than the films that were driving the multiplexes. So, ironically, in a way, it seems like the independent cinema in Oxford is in a strong position now compared to some of the bigger chains.
And I think people may want to go to smaller venues as well, where there's fewer people, which does make sense. Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So what haven't we talked about? I do have questions. There are some questions coming in from the audience. But just before we move on to that, I suppose the big question is about diversity, and do you believe this do you believe in diversity quotas? Do you believe the kind of things that BAFTA are setting up, where there's a certain percentage of people, both in front and behind the camera, have to be from certain minority groups? I know the word minority is not always enjoyed by everybody, but that's the kind of terminology that gets used. Do you think quotas work, or what's your experience of that way of working, thinking?
That's a very good question, and pros and cons. And so I'm just going to go back a little bit. And before I worked in films, I used to do some background work on EastEnders, okay, and BBC again. And I was with one particular agency then, and there was a requirement to have a number of certain disabled people as a background artist. Or that there was a lead actor or actress, I can't remember. I don't watch it, but there was a requirement to have a certain number of people. So was that a quota? Possibly. Or is that just trying to show representation within society? And again, you know, this particular broadcaster has been constantly leading the way to have more diversity. They even, I'm just going to go off a little bit here. Back in 2015, I did a BBC weather presenting course. They were looking for people with different abilities. And I don't know if you've noticed that there is a weather presenter with a missing limb. And they are doing things. So whether quotas do work, I think they do, because they do find talent. And my first film being Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the crew back then, mainly men, mainly white. Recently working on a production, it was an eye-opener. A lot of women in the crew, and also of different ethnic minorities. Things are most definitely progressing. Could it also be that the film industry is welcoming more women? Could it be there are more courses out there and they're appealing to more women, and therefore they are able to move on into a career path because of their education? Could it be because of networking as well? Could it also be, okay, yes, you know, we need more women, so we're just going to have a call out for more women, because they are trying to change things. I think quotas do work in a positive way, because it allows people who wouldn't normally have been working in this industry to work in this industry, as well as Leavesden Studios, for example. There's a nursery called Wonderwork Nursery. So yes, women are able to work in the film industry, because usually it is women who are at home with childcare and, you know, have to sacrifice their careers. So I think there's a lot of positive things that are happening. And right now for me, because my husband is able to work from home, he's, you know, before his employer was like, your job can't be done from home, but because of the pandemic, he can do it from home. And that's also been helpful right now, where, you know, I'm talking to you guys here. My child is our son is at nursery. So my husband is working from home, and he's going to go in his lunch break to pick up our son. And then I'll be with him in the afternoon. And things like this are making it so much easier for, you know, people who have sacrificed their careers so that they can continue to do their jobs. Even working in the film industry, you know, I'm able to do it without thinking about, right, I need to get my parents involved. Who's going to pick up my son? Who's going to do this? And, you know, and I think this change is a positive thing. And I think, yes, quotas are also a positive thing, because it's encouraging people who wouldn't normally work in this industry. You know, we've made it easy for you. We want people like you, and having parts written for people like me or with different abilities. So I think, yes, it is a positive thing.
Great, thank you. One other factor, which again we've talked about quite a lot as part of the festival so far, is the role of mentoring. So we had a whole panel about mentoring, trying to get people from different economic backgrounds into the industry, because that's also been a big problem. The industry is has been very much a place for middle class, richer people to work in, people of color, people with disabilities. So have you got any experience of mentoring? Have you been a mentor, or would that have been useful to you when you started out?
I think it would have been useful to have had somebody to guide me, to advise me. I think, and I think that's a great thing, because it does, like you said, enable people who have been less fortunate. Where yes, the film industry is known. If you know somebody, sometimes it is who you know. Sometimes, and then it just continues the path of, okay, it's somebody who's from a wealthy background, somebody who has studied, somebody who's got parents who work in a certain area in this industry, and their circle just stays the same, and they just recommend the same kind of people. But now that it's so much more diverse, and it's opening its doors to more people, and the mentoring, I think that's such a positive thing. And I think if this had happened maybe 15, 20 years ago, where would we be now?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the positive steps are being taken, and it's better late than never.
Absolutely. Great. So let's have a look, see if we've got any questions in the chat. So we have a question from Lindsay Steenberg, who you met last time when you came to Books. Lindsay says, I'd be curious to hear more about spaces where change are happening, including casting calls, agents, and script writing. Are there ways that we as educators, lecturers can encourage our students to be mindful of this, or other spaces where this may be happening? So it's about, have you got any advice for us as educators to pass on to students about how to engage with the changes that are going on positively?
I think talking about actors who have started to pave the way for people with different abilities, with different ethnicities as well. For example, talking about people like Peter Dinklage, talking about Liz Carr, for example, the British actress, who is now moving into Hollywood. Talking about John Boyega, for example, the BLM movement, he actually cried, and he said he doesn't care if his career is over. He stood for something he believed in, and on top of that, and what followed that was big productions actually supported him. So talking about actors which have made changes, and sort of encouraging an open mind. So, when people are on courses and they follow a path maybe, or they write something in the end, or, they become a casting director, or it's to give people the chance and be more open-minded. I, for example, auditioned for a commercial almost 2 years ago, and it was they wanted an Asian woman. I was the only small Asian woman that was there. And usually in the past, auditions have been where I've physically been to an audition. It's usually been where there've been a number of small actors, because they want a small actor, but they wanted an Asian woman. I'm an Asian woman, but yes, I'm also small. So giving the chance, so if you're looking for somebody who's got brown hair, they could be in a wheelchair, for example, talking about things like that. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And it is about the kind of roles that get written, I guess, as much as anything else. So yeah, if there's a role for a person, a non-specific person with dark hair, why shouldn't it be you as much as the next person? But also, there should be roles that explore all kinds of different people's life and what goes on
Yes.
their families and their history. And I guess it's how do we encourage creators and scriptwriters to think more broadly, or get people like yourself into those roles, you know, into producing roles, into more roles.
There is also a mentality where you have somebody who is so different. Do they take the attention away from, you know, if this particular person hasn't been written in as a lead character or a main character, for example, say as a background artist, you have somebody, there's so many, everybody's of average height, then you have somebody like myself. Am I taking attention away from everybody else that's in that particular scene? So it's also trying to change perceptions.
Yeah, so it's not easy. I'm sure it will take a long time. So another question coming from Julian Stringer, who's a colleague of film studies academic. And Julian says, thank you so much for your insights today, Arti. Have you seen any animation films which you feel adequately represent who you are? Specifically animated films.
No, and that's a really good question. I have actually not seen, and we watch a lot of animated films at the moment, and I haven't seen anything. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, yeah, I think people need to speak about it, because animation has always been huge and it's getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, that's interesting. Something to make noise about.
Maybe you should write one.
Yes.
I'm sure Netflix would talk to you.
Really good idea.
So yeah, more questions in the chat. This is from Pauline Brandt, who is a colleague here at Brooks. It's about scripts we've just touched upon. What would enable scripts written specifically with diversity in mind make an impact? So I guess that's about the writing of the scripts, but also helping them to become scripts that get produced and that become big hits. What do you think would help? Does that make sense? Do you want to clarify that, Pauline? So you said, what would enable scripts written specifically with diversity in mind have an impact? So is that
yes. Hello, Arti. Yeah. I can see that in some cases there is a sense of taking back control and writing characters who don't exist in the mainstream most of the time. But you could get together, you could approach Netflix. You know, what would enable these scripts to break through, do you think?
Okay, so yes, I think more and more people writing scripts with people like myself, with different people, constantly getting in touch with big streaming channels, big studios. I think, you know, the more people that do it, I think it will actually, they'll think, actually, yes, you know, we need to do something about this. My husband, for example, has always said, we need to make our own material. He says to me, you know, let's do something. Because if things aren't being written out there for you, let's make our own. So I think, you know, he wants to do something. I think if more and more people have people with different abilities when they are writing a script, and if Netflix, for example, Amazon, you know, Disney, Warner Brothers, you know, the list is endless. They have like a wad of scripts which are sitting on their desk, and there's more and more diverse people. They might pick up on something eventually. It's like anything, you know, what's the probability of something, you know, if you've got something in front of you, the more it is in front of you, you are more likely to pick it, aren't you? So yeah, I think we just need to get people writing, don't we?
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. Thanks for clarifying. A question from Maya, our colleague Maya. Maya says, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need quotas, but the system currently isn't built in a way which naturally ensures diversity and accessibility. I lived in London for a short period of time. I was always wondering why the infrastructure is so restrictive, how people with different abilities or even with pushchairs deal with everyday tasks and travel. Yeah, I've been around London with a pushchair, and it is a nightmare. Do you think more needs to be done in terms of bottom-up pressure for things to change? And is there a part which you would really like to play? That's a separate question, I guess. Do you think there's more needs to be done in terms of bottom-up pressure? And do you have access to politics? Has anyone ever approached you and asked you to be part of advisory boards or policy networks, anything along those lines?
No one's approached me about politics. I think at the moment I just like to stay clear of being involved in politics. As much as, you know, I have a lot to say about a number of things, but I am, for example, talking to organizations, interestingly, speaking to a transport organization yesterday about accessibility and about how, you know, they can make things a bit more easier for people to get around. For me, getting off the train onto the platform edge, there's a huge gap. I have to stand there and think, right, 1, 2, 3, jump, you know, and those in a wheelchair, you know, they probably call ahead and there's a ramp. Things have to be planned ahead. You know, you can't just walk out of the door and say, right, I'm just going to go to London. You need a strategy, you need a plan. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of anxiety involved. So even, you know, going to an audition, a lot is involved. Auditions are like job interviews, and it takes a lot out of you. But say you are somebody with a different ability, you've got another 50% of added stress and anxiety because you need to get there. So that's why, you know, Zoom, but, you know, doing things from home is so much easier. And then, yes, accessibility within the film industry. So money needs to be spent to make it possible. But okay, of course, if it's a creature that has to run or running on all fours, then, you know, I mean, like it would be somebody who can do it. You know, like say somebody's just graduated in sciences and they're applying for a job at a lab. So somebody who's graduated from dance school wouldn't apply. So it does make sense. People only apply for jobs that they can do. And there is always a breakdown of a certain type of person that is required for a particular job because it's written in. So, you know, I saw something recently, they wanted somebody of a Southeast Asian background. Okay, it's an Oriental character, so I'm not going to apply. You know, it just makes sense. You would apply for something that you think you can do. But I think it's a big thing for film studios, for streaming channels, for writers, for directors to consider people with different abilities, to make it easier for people like myself to have more auditions, to have auditions out there. You know, I had talked about, I think even when I came to talk back in 2016, I mentioned, you know, I would like to go to an open casting where it's for an Asian woman, you know, a female, skin color like me, you know, but I turn up. But then would they see me and would they think, oh no, she's going to take too much attention away from what we're trying to do? I think there needs to be
I guess people need to take a risk, don't they?
Yes.
And just give it a try.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, like the Bridgerton example again. Sorry to keep talking about this, but
they did it.
and everyone, you know, it's the biggest TV show in the world. So people do get over it. They learn and they move on, and people are very accepting generally if you give them the opportunity to be so. I think producers can be too concerned about trying not to offend people generally. Okay, so I've got a question from a film student. So thanks. I'm glad to see there are some film students here. This is Elise Bowes. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Elise. She says, "Hi, Arti. I'm a film student with a particular interest in screenwriting. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what screenwriters can do to write diverse characters with different abilities, ethnicities, and so on that are authentic and don't lean into stereotypes. what processes should be involved during the writing process to achieve this?
Look at society, look at how diverse it is, and don't assume because somebody looks a different way that they're not educated, that they are not able to do things. Like, for example, there have been times where people have assumed I don't understand or I don't know what I'm doing because of what I look like. For when I worked on the Paralympic opening ceremony, I met accountants, I met business owners, I met, there may be somebody, I haven't met somebody, but there might be somebody who is a doctor who is in a wheelchair, a doctor who is in short stature. I had to go for a blood test months ago, and there was a nurse who was in a wheelchair. Everybody does lead a normal life. I mean, what is normal? We do everything that everybody else does. So just look at society and look at, even maybe in your university, there might be people with different abilities. They're studying, they're going about their own day to day, and they're making their future. So if you're writing a part for a scientist, why can't they necessarily be an amputee? Because they're looking for maybe a cure to help. What is it called when you've lost a limb and you get pain because I've forgotten what the term is, but sometimes people suffer with pain because their limb is no longer there. Phantom limb, that's it. It could be a scientist because they're looking for a cure, so just look at society as a whole.
And would you advise students to, in terms of researching their scripts and their stories, the obvious thing is to just seek out as many different people as possible, talk to everybody, make contacts. It's quite easy to make contacts online with all different kinds of people and just hear their stories and then use those to bring authenticity to the work, I suppose.
Yes. Like most actors, if they are portraying a character, if it's a true story, Riz Ahmed recently, I think he spent 10 months, I've forgotten the gentleman's name who he was playing, but he spent time with him, learned about him and researched in order to portray him in the best way possible. So even as a writer, spend time with people. If you're trying to portray a certain type of character, a certain type of person, spend time with them, research. I think with anything, if you are learning something new, writing is a skill in itself, but if you were learning about a certain character, a certain type of person, you would research and you would learn. So spend time with people.
Great, thank you. Another observation question from Lindsay. Lindsay is someone who spends a lot of time watching children's TV, as she has her own children. She often thinks about how important diversity and inclusion is in children's TV, as we've been discussing already, and how this makes representation normal and may change the way children think and therefore feed into society. And I guess that possibly links up with Julian Stringer's point about animation, because animated films have such a great access to children's imaginations and the way they view the world. That if we could bring a little bit of what the BBC do into the sort of Netflix animation realm, then maybe something really special would happen. It's not really a question, but it's just kind of.
That's a great statement.
Yeah, let's make it happen. I think we should do it. So one more question about your ambitions for the future. Is there a part you'd really like to play in the future, or is there a specific genre of film you'd like to be involved in? Do you have a dream role?
I think what I'm striving to do is to constantly audition to get a part where I can be seen. Not that there has been anything wrong with where my career has been, but I've always wanted to, whilst being in this industry, is to change perceptions and to prove I'm small, yes. I'm small, I'm Asian, I'm a female. I've got 3 obstacles already, but I want to show that I can portray a character, and I would just love to play, you know, if not a lead character, a supporting character where, you know, I'm given the chance to show that, you know, I am from a normal society. I am what society also makes up. And, you know, people like me should be seen more. And it is the media that, you know, is an eye opener, that tells a story that reaches out to so many people. And also it's a form of escapism as well. You know, so many people escape to watch something, to get away from, you know, reality, to get away from certain things. And sometimes we walk away watching something and it's really touched our hearts and it's had an impact. And I want to do something where, you know, I can make somebody think, wow. It's a huge ambition, but I'm trying my best.
Well, it's very important to be ambitious. We're always telling our students that you've got to dream big, otherwise you don't get anywhere. Yeah, so any more questions in the chat? Just another comment from Paolo, who is a colleague and also a professional scriptwriter. He says he's currently working on an animated series, and he can confirm that diversity and inclusion are their #1 priority whenever they develop a new story in any episode, and that's mandated from the producers. So clearly there are big changes going on in the world of TV, which is very encouraging. So I suppose one final question, which I was thinking about, which is the kind of, I don't know if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm kind of outing myself as a RuPaul fan. But one question they always ask before the final is what would you say if you could meet yourself as a child, as someone who's growing up in the southeast of England, you know, pre-2000. If you could meet yourself as a child, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Let's start with RuPaul.
Never put yourself in a category. You don't belong to a certain tick box just because you're a female, you're Asian, you're this, you're that. Everybody is an individual and has a purpose to make their life their own. So you don't belong in a tick box.
Sure, that's great advice. Thank you. Sorry, flooring you. I didn't warn you about that one. I should have warned you. Okay, so has anyone got any final comments or questions in the chat? Let's have a look. No, I think I think everybody is happy looking at what's going on. Yeah, everybody's happy. So I suppose I will wind up. Thank you so much, Arti, for coming along today and joining us. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and you know, I really hope that everyone listening today feels your warmth and your intelligence, and we can support getting more people like you behind the camera, in front of the camera, making, you know, as politicians. Put it out there. You should be in politics. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming to the session. Please do check out our other events, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye bye. Thanks everybody. Bye, Arti.